Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jake Green. I'm the Head of Technical Engagement here at the Scolmore Group, and I'm joined by the wealth of knowledge, Tim Benstead, which is one of the engineers here.
Hello, Jake.
Hello. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to go back in time. We're going to look through the history books, just because, really.
Well, we need to consider the nature of protective devices, don't we, and how they've developed over time from the earliest days through to what we currently have with SPDs, AFDDs, and a whole range of other means of protection, moulded RCD or modular RCDs, and the rest. Oh, it's just so much that's happening.
No, so if we go back then, 1882 was the first set of wiring regulations. Regulation 9, where it talked about protecting circuits, essentially.
Exactly right, Jake. It was already recognised that if you put in a thinner bit of wire onto a circuit supplying lights and what have you, should there be an excess of current, then that thinner bit of wire would melt. It's a fuse. And so that's what we're doing. So the very first means of protection was a fuse, and it was recognised as such.
Okay. So we started with the fuse. I'm just going to sort of go through as to where we are at now. So we had fuses, then we went to circuit breakers, then we went to RCDs, essentially. Then we went to SPDs, and then AFDDs, and this is where we're pretty much at now. So lots changes, things change, technology changes, and we appreciate that. But the fuse is still very, very good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole development of the fuse over the last century and a half, 150 years nearly, that we've been looking at the nature of fuses, and we've still got within protective devices fuses.
Yeah,
they work. There is if something's lasted 150 years, it's a good idea.
It's a very good idea, and we still see them, even in things like plug tops.
Yeah.
So we see them in there. Yeah. Trying to achieve the coordination with the protective devices.
Yeah. You'll still see consumer units with a rewirable fuse in.
Yeah, and they still do a fantastic job. It's just looking at the next level of protection is probably the problem, isn't it? So we start with those fuses, we then go into RCDs essentially, MCBs first, then we go into RCDs. Yeah. So what was the driver really then for the change from rewirable fuses, as it were, to circuit breakers?
Yeah, I think there's a number of steps in that process, isn't there? So you have your rewirable fuse, which 1882 would be a rewirable fuse. You have your BS3036, which we still come across with a rewirable fuse. The problem is, though, Jake, that they have a very limited breaking capacity. They're a bit, rough and ready is perhaps the wrong phrase, but they're not so close we can't judge quite exactly when they pop. And then you could have people putting in the wrong size fuse wire. We've all been on sites where they've put some seriously dodgy things in. And so when we've moved on to, shall we say, a better type of fuse, a cartridge fuse, the BS1361 type 1 and 2s, the HRC. So we've moved through all of those types of fuses, and many of them still exist. Then we move to a circuit breaker, and that gives us a level of control within domestic premises and within normal commercial industrial arrangements that didn't previously exist. And it allows us to, shall we say, combine two physics principles. So we can look at it as both an electromagnet issue and as a thermal issue. And so a circuit breaker operates on both those principles, whereas a fuse, it melts.
Quite simply, it melts. So, yeah, you mentioned there like the way that things have moved on in terms of people being able to rewire them into whatever sizes they wanted. The whole level of risks that come with rewirable fuses sort of getting outweighed now by circuit breakers. So circuit breakers then moving into sort of 60898s.
Yeah.
And again, we're seeing different things there. We're seeing B curves, C curves, D curves. Yeah. Again, something that as technology has gone on, we need to understand that the equipment that they're connected to operates differently.
That's right. So again, if we're operating with a type B circuit breaker on a B curve, we recognise that as long as there's no big inductive loading, there's no heavy switching that's associated with that, then they'll happily function for a whole lifetime in accordance with that. When you've got a wee bit more inductive loading, say certain types of lighting, certain types of smaller motor, then a C-type makes eminent good sense. And then you move into big inductive loading, then you're into D-types. But recognise that you can't just randomly pick one. You can't just say, oh, well, I'll pick a type D every time because it'll always work, because it might not be the right device for a load that doesn't have an inductive element associated with it. So, yeah.
So, thinking about domestically, then we just mentioned that as well. The type B's
starting point.
I very well remember a time where I actually had to put a D curve inside a domestic property because they had such a large transformer on a big chandelier.
That would do it.
It was just taking it out constantly.
That would do it.
So yeah, again, understanding that there is change needed, and then we move into RCDs. Yeah,
RCDs are different to a fuse or a circuit breaker in that they are not a fault current device as such. They operate on an imbalance. And so if it's a pure RCD, it has no means of overload protection. Well, a fuse and a circuit breaker do. Yeah. And so if you were to stick an RCD, a sole RCD, an RCCB in, then it would have to be provided with some means of external overload protection like a circuit breaker or fuse associated with that. But the RCDs came in. Originally, there were two devices. There was the voltage operated earth leakage circuit breaker.
Which everybody ripped out.
And everybody ripped out. And then there was the current operated earth leakage circuit breaker. And in many ways, the current RCCBs are based on that current ELCB model that existed back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, when they were really put in. I remember.
You remember well. And then we go from 61008 to 61009.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much where most contractors are at these days, aren't they? That, the RCCB, as it were, is now become the RCBO.
Yeah.
Which does include that overcurrent protection.
It does indeed. And so you've got that sense of having a circuit breaker and an RCD in one device, in one little unit, is perfect. Because it covers, as you say, the overcurrent protection, and it covers the earth fault, the imbalance.
So that's a very quick, real guide into where we're at, but we're seeing more and more devices now. So we're not just seeing the fact that we want to protect against overload or short circuit. We're now seeing the fact that we want to protect against overvoltage.
Yep.
So that leads us nicely into SPD. So this is still a protected device, isn't it?
It is.
It's showing that, again, I like to call it the circle of trust. So you've got your overload, overvoltage, overcurrent, and then you've got your fire protection, which is your arc fault detection devices, and the 62606.
Yeah.
So can we see there being any more changes as we develop along?
I mean, technology is always moving on. Manufacturers and scientists are always looking at ways in which you can work these things appropriately. However, recognise the fuse is still here. We still continue to install fuses. However, as you move into bigger industrial arrangements, then perhaps an RCCB or an RCBO isn't big enough. And so you move into a modular residual current device that, in essence, you create by putting together the relevant current transformers and coils with a device that allows an RCBO to be created and set by you in accordance with what you require for the much heavier currents. And those exist now as well. And so development's moving on all the time. And of course, with the 62606 arc fault detection device, that's going to be used more and more.
So rewinding right the way back from the beginning, because we're going to do this a couple of times, we picked little bits up. Coordination of the devices, was that really a thing then, or was it, in terms of putting something smaller closer to the appliance? Because we were talking about that we have the little cartridge fuses inside the plug tops now, and then obviously you have something else backing it up.
Yeah. Coordination wasn't in the first regs. That it was merely. It was just not thought of.
Yeah.
And so it was a case of you stick a fuse in, you pick the fuse appropriate for the cable, and that was it. There was no subtlety associated with it. And so, of course, if something went wrong here, then everything would go wrong back here, and you would lose the supply accordingly. However, as time developed, then it was recognised that if you could have upstream and downstream devices coordinated in such a way that the fault closest to a fuse caused that fuse to operate first was a good thing to maintain supply. The problem we have, of course, is a BS3036 fuse, the rewirable fuse, just doesn't do that well.
Because we have no idea as to when it's actually going to go. We've got a rough indication as to when it's going to go, but on the whole, you can go, right, that particular time there it's going to go.
And so we move on to your BS1361s and your BS88 fuses, because you can get coordination and you get a better braking capacity associated with it under different fault levels. So as the fault levels rise, you drop off the 3036, you bring in the 1361 and you bring in the BS88.
Okay. So you mentioned BS88 there, then that's obviously most of the time that's at our cutouts. We've got different types of those as well. Was that really a thing? I know you were talking about coordination and that wasn't just, we said that it didn't exist, but at what point did the BS88 come in and then the 3036s, if that makes sense?
Right, the 3036 was first.
Yep.
BS88s came in later. I can't give you a date. Bugger. I can't give you a date. However, it came in later. It's a much more nuanced technology. And a HRC fuse is a beautifully designed fuse. It really does work incredibly well and gives you a very precise disconnection time. We can differentiate exactly the point at which you get the pre-arcing time and then you get the fault clearance, and you can coordinate HRC fuses upstream and downstream beautifully. You can't do that with a 3036 in any way, shape or form.
So it's probably worth as well, we've mentioned lots as well, but the 3871, Tim, that was pretty much moving on from them fuses in terms of circuit breakers before the 60898.
That's right.
The 3871 was the daddy.
It was the circuit breaker that came in and we were all familiar with right from the get-go. You used to get, if I remember rightly, was it the Wilex where you took out the rewirable fuse and you had a plug-in circuit breaker with a press button tester? I remember putting a number of those in, but they were 3871s, and all circuit breakers at that time were BS 3871s, and they weren't type B, C and D, were they?
No, they were 1, 2, 3 and 4 if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I only know that because I was ripped loads of them out to replace them.
That's true. Interestingly, the D and the 4 were similar but not the same, and the 4 gave you a much wider shall we say, inductive loading capability, to the point where they almost never tripped.
So just on to BS88, so I know we just briefly mentioned that as well, but we've got different types of those as well.
Yeah.
For those that are listening that are probably not so familiar with this, maybe you're an apprentice, there is different types of BS88 fuses that we need to be aware of.
There are. There's the normal, the GG rated. They have a certain rating of fuse value, 6, 10, 16, 20, 25, and it goes up all the way up to silly numbers, 315, 400, and so on and so forth. And they are a standard device that deals with overload and short circuit. They're associated with those things. We also get motor rated or GM rated devices, and they are smaller in a sense, because your overload protection has been taken out of the requirement for the fuse and has been put into an overload device associated with motor. And so all that device is having to do in terms of the HRC fuse is to allow short circuit protection or fault level protection to exist.
And what about protective short circuit when it comes to those?
They're big numbers. Big numbers for protective short circuit value. So your BS 1361, which was your older cartridge fuses, you had a type 1 and a type 2. A type 1 would be up to 16.5 kilamp. A type 2 would be up to 33 kilamps or 33,000 amps. But your HRC, you're at 50 kilamp and 80 kilamp, depending on the type and the nature of that device. So again, enormous values of fault current level that can withstand. However, you only get to do it once.
You do. You do indeed. So one of the things that we want to talk about as well is the fuses, standard fuses, Tim. Making sure that really you are getting your fuses from a reputable manufacturer and making sure that they have the correct markings on there. You got the current rating, the voltage, the time current, the correct approvals as well. We know that Electrical Safety First did quite a bit of work on this, didn't they? When they were talking about fuses that are coming into the country, ensuring that they are made to the correct standards.
And the same goes for any device, doesn't it? Let's be honest, you pick a circuit breaker up, you want it from a reputable manufacturer, and the general rule is if it's too good to be true, it truly is too good to be true.
Yeah. The other thing we're going to mention is Regulation 11, Tim, the electricity work regulations. It's something that we need to touch upon because I guess that's where it all forms from. Yeah,
it does. I mean, we know that the electricity at work regulations is really rooted, Jake, in the old Factories Act of 1908, 1944, and in many ways there's very little change within the electricity at work regs of 1989. And so the requirement of Regulation 11, I'm just going to read it, says efficient means suitably located shall be provided for protecting from excess of current every part of a system as may be necessary to prevent danger. I think it's quite a simple requirement, but the spread of that means you can't just stick a protective device at the front end of the installation and then go, right, I'm covered. Because it's got to be at every part of the installation. And so, yes, something at the front end, and then at every subsequent breakdown point where you change the size of conductor, where you change the type of conductor perhaps, but at every point where necessary, you stick in a means of protection. And it might be full overcurrent protection, but there may be other things that you need to do as well under earth fault and so on and so forth.
Okie dokie. So again, electricity at work regulations, mandatory.
Mandatory. It is the law.
Indeed. And I think the last point just to real touch upon then is MCCBs and ACBs, air circuit breakers, and the fact that there is capability to be able to delay settings or change time settings within those particular devices as well.
Yeah, and the reason, of course, we want those delays to set in is because we want to guarantee the coordination. We want to get that selectivity in place so that we can say, in terms of any upstream devices, yes, this one will not operate until that one has gone. And so it allows a wee bit of play to exist to tweak the time current curves, Jake.
Okie dokie. So that's just a very quick, short, real brief look into history. But if you would like to comment and tell us what points we missed or what dates we missed, feel free to do so. Like, subscribe and share. Comment on that as well, and we'll see you on the next one.